The story kicks off with our protagonist realizing he's been transmigrated as a generic side character. He spent 9 long years working his tail off, and finally had a major breakthrough in his power. But then he accidentally discovers that someone else was way more incredible and stole all the spotlight. And just like that, our guy is left completely speechless. At that moment, he and the others fall into despair, wondering what kind of unfair world this is. Right then, the system pops up saying the worldview data was wrong, and it was time for a reset. The protagonist collapses to the ground and starts crying over his 9 years of wasted effort. But he stops and thinks this is the start of a cliché novel, so his talent must be insane. The scene cuts to the spiritual root testing ceremony, where his talent would be measured. However, when the results came in, to the young man's shock, he didn't have a single spiritual root. He then starts to lament, saying this transmigration was nothing like in the novels. While he's wallowing in self-pity, an old man approaches him and asks if he'd like to cultivate. Our boy gets excited by the question, thinking this could be the cheat he's been dreaming of. The scene cuts to the old man's sect, which is called the Qingyun Dao sect. And inside is the sect master, Taoist Taihua, who says he has a task for his disciple. The master then starts desperately begging his disciple to help him out, just this one time. This is Su Chengyu, the eldest disciple, and he asks what important event a tiny sect like theirs could possibly have. The old man explains that a new policy might shut their sect down if they don't recruit 8 disciples. But he says that recruitment is extremely difficult, and all the sects are desperate for members. Some are even using pretty shameless tactics to lure new disciples to their side. They're shamelessly offering all sorts of things to convince the youth to join them. But the master managed to find one sucker named Ye Ping, also known as our protagonist, who has 0 talent. He's a kid who doesn't care about money and will do anything as long as they teach him how to cultivate. The master tells Changju that the boy is very naive, but he's afraid the new disciple might run away. So, the plan is to pretend to be a sage and make up techniques to trick the newbie for a while. The eldest disciple is disappointed because he just has to act, and it's not something serious. Changju asks his master if he knows the nickname others have given him. And with a serious face, he starts to brag, saying that he is known as the King of Pretense, showing off his imposing presence. Changju claims that when it comes to looking cool, no one in all of Qingzhou can beat him. After that, he starts boasting that the master found the right person, while Taihua wonders if that's really something to be proud of. The master then says that no matter what, Changju needs to keep the rookie in the sect for 1 year. However, the young man refuses, saying he doesn't need that much time to fool the kid. He brags that a year is way too long, and for a newbie like that, a little effort is all it takes. The young man guarantees he'll make the newcomer love the sect so much that he'll want to come back in his next life. At this, the master starts praising the King of Pretense for already getting into character. Changju gets so confident that he promises to swallow his own sword with sauce if he fails this mission. He then says he's heading to the mountain, and the master offers him a ride on his flying sword. But the eldest disciple refuses the help, saying it's not necessary. He turns around and says he's no longer a beginner who needs help getting around. With that, the young man raises his hand. The master is stunned as he seems to recognize that gesture from somewhere. With a dead serious face, Changyu says that this prosperous era is everything he's ever wished for. Suddenly, he raises a finger, and a powerful purple aura surges as he calls for his sword. The old man is dumbfounded, as he never expected his useless disciple to be able to fly on a sword. Changju gives his master a very smug look. Despite all the posing, nothing happened. The master is then disappointed and starts to think he's been had. The young man admits it was just for show and that he still needs a ride to the mountain. The scene cuts to later on the mountain peak where everything is ready for the show. Up there, Changju is shivering from the cold, even while wearing a robe that's supposed to be resistant to low temperatures. He even sneezes and complains that he only chose this spot to create some atmosphere, but now he's freezing. But suddenly, he senses Ye Ping approaching, and his expression completely changes. Immediately, the King of Pretense gets ready to begin his grand performance. Meanwhile, our protagonist struggles to climb the mountain, thinking about how incredible immortals are. The boy looks up, mesmerized by the sight of his new master. He sees Changju standing majestically against the full moon, creating an absolutely epic scene. The eldest disciple puts on a serious and mysterious face, getting fully into his role as a wise sage. Then, Ye Ping finally reaches the top and faces the imposing figure of his senior. To impress him even more, Changju makes his sword float toward his hand, glowing with a brilliant blue aura. Ye Ping is completely awestruck, wondering if his new master is a sword immortal. But then he starts to suspect something, thinking that a sect that would accept him must be terrible. So why are the disciples so impressive and seem so strong? The boy then has an epiphany and seems to have figured it all out. He imagines that the sect is actually a supreme hidden place concealed from the world. Our protagonist gets excited, thinking everyone here must be strong and can help him. He then starts putting the pieces together, remembering what happened earlier that day. The young man recalls the ruined state of the sect when he first arrived. He didn't notice it at the time, but it was strange for a cultivation sect. But even in ruins, every corner of the place was impeccably clean. Yiping thinks it's all too perfect to be just a coincidence. But if it's all done to hide from the world, then everything makes perfect sense. Our boy then declares that 3 million immortals would bow before his master. Changju is taken aback, thinking the kid has a real talent for bragging. He then decides he needs to respond to the compliment in an equally impressive way. He says he will bestow a blessing of luck and releases a powerful aura from his body. This blue energy then completely envelops our protagonist's body. Ye Ping is totally blown away with no idea what's happening. The eldest disciple explains that this breeze is a mystical art that enhances one's aptitude for cultivation. Ye Ping is stunned, as a normal sect could never do something like that. The boy bows and thanks Changju, while the king of pretense feels a pain in his arm. The eldest disciple holds back a laugh, thinking that was just an ordinary breeze. He then sits down and says that before teaching the way of the sword, he has a question for the boy. Our protagonist gets excited, as this is just like in the novels before learning a secret technique. The eldest disciple asks what the newcomer thinks is the supreme form of the sword. Changju internally smirks, thinking that no matter the answer, he'll come out looking smarter. Our protagonist takes the question very seriously and starts to ponder a good answer. To him, even the way the question was asked seemed perfect and full of meaning. The young man is certain his master is a hidden sage, and he needs to answer carefully. He feels that a common answer would be too shallow for such a profound question. A whole hour passes, and our protagonist is still thinking of an answer to the question. With that, Changju complains that he's going to freeze to death on the mountaintop and tells the boy to hurry up and answer. Yiping finally declares that the supreme form of the sword is a single blade of grass that can sever the sun, the moon, and the stars. The eldest disciple is completely shocked by his new apprentice's unexpected answer. He keeps mentally repeating the phrase about the blade of grass that can cut down the heavens. Changju imagines the power of such a technique and thinks he's never heard of anything so grand in his life. The young man is stunned, since the strongest person he ever met only managed to split a mountain. Our protagonist then timidly asks if he went a little overboard. The king of pretense is mesmerized by the iconic phrase and decides to steal it for himself. So, he tells the newbie that it was indeed an exaggeration and that the path of cultivation should be stable and humble. Since the boy seems to have understood, Changju prepares to teach him an important lesson. He then unsheaths his sword and makes an impressive slash with his purple energy. With that, a sword mark appears on the ground, and he says he'll leave it for the newbie. Changju explains that it contains the strongest sword intent, and that the boy must study it. Yiping is overjoyed because now he's absolutely sure he's joined a legendary secret sect. The king of pretense then runs off to find his second brother and show off a little. On the way, he runs into a girl who calls him Big Brother. The young woman then asks him what he thought of the new recruit's talent. She stares at him with a curious gaze, waiting for an answer. Changju scolds her for snooping, but she says she was just curious. He then has a brilliant idea and decides to test his new phrase on her. The young man changes the subject and prepares to ask an important question. With a serious face, he asks if she knows how powerful the supreme form of the sword is. The girl is confused and doesn't understand what that has to do with her. He then reveals that the supreme form of the sword is using a blade of grass to sever the heavens. The young lady is completely blown away by her big brother's words. She compliments his art of pretense, and Changju strikes a pose, confirming that he's improved. After that, the young woman asks him to answer the question she asked before. She wants to know how long he thinks it will take the rookie to comprehend the sword intent. Changju then admits he has no idea, since not even he can comprehend it. The girl is shocked by his answer and wonders if her big brother is messing with her. 2 hours later, the scene returns to the mountain peak where our protagonist was. The protagonist is seriously analyzing the sword mark his master left on the ground. He starts to have doubts, thinking it's just a common crack and that he's been tricked. But he quickly scolds himself for thinking that, as everything has proven, his master is a great sage. He convinces himself that he just needs to try harder to understand the sword intent. Yiping fills himself with determination to keep trying without giving up. He keeps encouraging himself to continue his analysis, not wanting to abandon his great goal. At that moment, he sees the silhouette of a powerful swordsman reflected in his eye. Then, the figure of a swordsman shrouded in a blue aura appears in his mind's eye. The figure holds a longsword and begins to demonstrate various swordsmanship moves. The swordsman then executes a series of extremely powerful sword techniques. For Yiping, it's as if a great bell is ringing in his ears. 4 sword methods with 12 movements each become clearer and clearer in his mind. After seeing it all, he unsheaths his sword as if he's been practicing for years. The protagonist starts repeating the sword movements that appeared in his mind over and over. He practices the sequence once and immediately follows it up with a second time. And then for the third time, he continues his movements perfectly, without tiring. With each repetition, his strikes become faster and much more precise. Yi Ping masters the initial 12 movements and even learns 15 new strikes. In no time, our protagonist can already execute 20 different sword moves. To him, all this information is more terrifying than having teachings forced into his mind. The young man sits there, not quite understanding how it all happened so quickly. He then realizes the only explanation is that it was all thanks to his big brother. Our boy can't believe that a simple breeze could have boosted his talents so absurdly. At this, he weeps with joy and deeply regrets ever doubting his master. Ye Ping calms down and refocuses on the sword mark to learn even more. 7 days pass, and the scene cuts to the eldest disciple's residence. Inside, we see Su Changju's pretense treasure box filled with accessories. Then, our king of pretense starts getting ready to meet the sect's new disciple. With his robes fluttering in the wind, he was finally ready to go. He then comments that it's a great day to start his grand performance. With an air of superiority, he heads out to find his new disciple and check on his progress. Changju walks with an air of superiority, looking like a great sage. But in reality, he's exhausted and complains about having to walk so much just to keep up appearances. The young man gets irritated, wondering why everyone thinks practicing with a sword is so easy. He then remembers a conversation he had with his younger sister 7 days ago. The young lady laughed at him for practicing for 10 years and still not comprehending sword intent. The king of pretense gets angry and says the way of the sword is much harder than she thinks. He then starts bragging about his 4 thunder sword technique to seem more powerful. The young man explains that it's divided into 4 sets, 1 for each season of the year. He says each set has 4 realms and the girl asks which level he's at now. He boasts that he's reached near perfection in the spring sword, but she doesn't seem impressed. Changju proclaims himself a prodigy, but the techniques chart reveals he's barely even started. The king of pretense makes a scary face and says that one day she'll see his true strength. The scene returns to the present and the young woman asks what the rookie's talent would be like if he understood the intent. He laughs hard and says that's impossible because sword intent is incredibly rare. The young man explains that intent is the most important thing and can turn any technique into magic. He explains that there are 3 great levels of swordsmanship and they're almost impossible to achieve. But the girl insists and asks again what would happen if the rookie managed such a feat. With a funny face, Changju says that's impossible since not even the genius of Qingzhou could do it. After that, the eldest disciple finally arrives at the mountain peak to see the boy's progress. With a confident air, he wonders if the new recruit is already awake for training. But he finds our protagonist on the ground, looking completely exhausted. Ye Ping remains focused, staring at the mark on the ground. The king of pretense is shocked and wonders what on earth happened to the rookie. He then realizes the boy took the story about the sword mark seriously. Because of this, the eldest disciple starts to feel incredibly guilty for deceiving the young man. He sighs and decides he'll make it up to the newbie later, as it's all for the good of the sect. At that moment, our protagonist senses his senior's presence and greets him. The king of pretense quickly gets into character and asks how his training is going. The boy says he understood everything thanks to him, while Changyu tries to console him for his failure. But the master of pretense realizes what was said and is shocked, asking the rookie to repeat himself. Ye Ping confirms that he learned 400 sword movements that morning. The king of pretense stares at him with a serious look, not believing what he just heard. In his thoughts, he starts laughing, thinking the rookie is lying because the mark was just made carelessly. Our protagonist is confused and doesn't understand why his master is acting that way. The boy thinks he laughed because it was too little and that a true master knows thousands of techniques. Ye Ping thinks that with his senior's help, anyone could learn 1,000 moves in a day. Because of this, he feels weak and is disappointed for having learned so few movements. Changju tries to console the newbie, saying it's normal to not understand anything since the technique is difficult. But the boy insists it's true, and his master gets annoyed, saying no one likes a liar. Ye Ping is devastated, thinking his senior believes he isn't even worthy of 400 strikes. The young man says that despite his poor talent, he succeeded thanks to the chance his master gave him. The eldest disciple becomes furious, as the newbie is disrespecting the way of the sword. At that moment, Changju gets genuinely angry, remembering all his own effort to learn. He remembers how he was always mocked for his slow progress, and it always hurt him deeply. So, the king of pretense tells the rookie to show him what he's learned, to teach him a lesson. Ye Ping agrees to the challenge, while Changju thinks the boy is going to regret this. At the top of the mountain, our protagonist gets into position and prepares to begin his demonstration. The protagonist then draws his sword, and a golden aura surges from it. He is completely focused, ready to show what he had learned. Then the newbie executes a powerful slash, leaving a trail of energy in the air. He moves with incredible speed, and his strikes are as fluid as water. To his master's surprise, the boy's technique is extremely fast and very precise. In the blink of an eye, the young man had already executed 36 different moves. The king of pretense can't believe what he's seeing. He is completely shocked by his new apprentice's impressive skill. and with every move the young man executes, he becomes more and more bewildered. Ye Ping's movements get faster and faster, and even after hitting the 36th form, he shows no sign of stopping. The boy continues his sequence of strikes without pausing for a single moment. He then finishes his demonstration with a series of incredible combos. The boy executes the 108th form of the technique with perfection, and suddenly a powerful golden thunderclap appears in the sky. Seeing this, the King of Pretense can't believe his eyes. He recognizes that energy. It was something he had seen in his dreams many times. In the sky, a massive red thunder dragon materializes, letting out a terrifying roar. Changju is paralyzed and breathless before this incredible display of power. That was the sign of the completion of the Spring Thunder Sword, a feat he had dreamed of for years. He is then in shock because it's impossible that the rookie could have achieved this, but to his astonishment, the boy's demonstration of power wasn't over yet. Right after, a green thunder dragon appears, symbolizing the Summer Sword. And before the first one could even dissipate, the Autumn Thunder Dragon also appeared. The dragons summoned by the boy begin to emanate an absurd pressure. But even with all this happening, Ye Ping's movements didn't slow down. They got faster. He continued his sequence of strikes with increasingly ridiculous speed. In the end, the young man became a blur. His strikes were so fast. To top it off, the Winter Thunder technique also reaches mastery, but the completion of this last sword seemed completely different from the first three. The King of Pretense breaks out in a cold sweat, as he has never felt such a terrifying presence before. The aura of the strike was so strong that he felt as if a harsh winter had suddenly arrived. Our protagonist finally stops his sequence at move number 432. With that, the demonstration of what he learned in 7 days comes to an end, leaving his master in shock. From that moment on, the rookie had completely mastered all 4 sword techniques. But the young man remains on the ground and says something is wrong, as he's still too dependent on his weapon. The boy then realizes he was being limited by the sword itself and understands the way of the Tao. Ye Ping gets a determined look and says he finally understands what his senior meant. The Master of Pretense is completely confused, having no idea what is happening. The young man then decides to test his new epiphany and starts talking about the types of swords. As he speaks, a sword of pure aura forms in his hands, and then he unleashes a powerful attack towards some nearby rocks. Changju is stunned as the rookie is having another epiphany, and he wonders if this is all a dream. Changju thinks that the Winter Sword brought a feeling of finality and annihilation. But this new aura is the opposite, representing rebirth and life. This green energy grows endlessly, spreading throughout the entire area. The Master of Pretense stares at the protagonist's sword and feels as if he's looking at the whole world. He feels that with just one strike from that weapon, he could defeat 1,000 soldiers at once. The young man then panics as he begins to realize what this truly is. He is in complete shock and asks himself if this is the legendary sword intent. But suddenly, all of that powerful golden energy simply dissipates into the air. With that, our protagonist is disappointed as he can no longer feel that power. The boy then laments that his talent must be terrible since the power only lasted for a moment. The King of Pretense is baffled to hear the rookie complain about his talent. He remembers that the greatest swordsman he'd ever seen didn't have an aura as pure as the boy's. With this, he's certain that it is sword intent and that the rookie is a supreme genius. Ye Ping then promises his master that he will work twice as hard not to disappoint him. Changju is conflicted because he can't praise him, but he knows he can't let a genius like this go. Changju hides his hands and agrees that the rookie's progress was quite mediocre. He thinks to himself that if the boy is mediocre, then the greatest genius he knows is utter trash. The King of Pretense then notices something. Pointing at the object, he asks what it is. Ye Ping hands him a book and says they are his notes, but he's embarrassed to show them. The Master of Pretense takes the book and opens it to see what the rookie has written. The notes glow with a golden light, revealing profound principles about the sword. For Changju, reading it was as shocking as seeing the starry sky for the first time. He is dumbfounded because even though he understood the words, he couldn't grasp their meaning. The young man asks if he taught him all that, and Ye Ping says it was just a superficial guess. The Master of Pretense is freaking out internally because he doesn't understand a single thing the rookie wrote. He remembers that another genius took over 10 years just to get an initial understanding, but in 7 days the rookie had already reached perfection and even touched upon sword intent. With that, Chanyu tells the boy to continue and says he'll be back in a few days. Ye Ping gets worried, thinking his master didn't like him and is going to kick him out of the sect. The boy begs not to be kicked out, as he finally found someone who would accept him. He remembers being rejected by over 50 sects for having no talent. Our protagonist knows this is his only chance and that he can't learn on his own. With that, he fills himself with determination not to lose the opportunity to train with masters. Meanwhile, the sect master is relaxing and enjoying the day, sipping some tea. Suddenly, Changju bursts in, shouting desperately that something terrible has happened. The old man is surprised and asks what's wrong, as his disciple isn't usually this agitated. The King of Pretense says with a serious look that his master's dream might just come true. He reveals that their sect is finally going to have a genius, leaving the master in utter shock.